My story began when I was 15 years old, living in South Wales, UK, in a town called Bridgend. Me and my friend that I'd known for a while will be known as Jack for the duration of the story, to protect his privacy, developed a liking for derelict buildings that had been left to rot where they stood. We considered ourselves as urban explorers. Urban exploring, for those who don't know, is the act of exploring abandoned properties with no consent or permission. So as you can guess, it was a pretty risky job in the first place. We had been to many extraordinary places that we found very interesting to explore. This was until we went out on our final expedition. It was summertime, the perfect time to explore, and we hadn't done it for a while. Me and my friend Jack got together after finding this very creepy looking building, which we thought would have been our best outing yet. We thought, that is. The place was an old rundown farmhouse type building, which looked like something straight out of a horror movie. It was great. It was behind an old railway track that was also not in use, so to get there we would have to cross the tracks. We were slightly worried about being seen, but luckily no one caught the eye of us. We had arrived at our destination. Finally, now we had to find a way in. We came to the large white sand coloured walls that looked like they would fall down at any moment. We knew this would be a dangerous job. We both looked at each other nervously. Neither of us prepared for what was about to happen. We came to the old wooden door that was lying on the floor. It looked like someone had kicked it in. We thought that it was just a group of potheads trying to find a good location to hang out for the night. We didn't think much of it at the time. We stepped through the old doorway, out of the sunlight and into the dark corridor. The old farmhouse. We were hit by the old, mouldy, grey, musky smell that lingers in many, if not all, abandoned buildings. We were used to it by now. I switched on my flashlight and was ready to explore this beauty of a find. We started down the first corridor and came to a large, dark room. This must have been the living room. There was a big portrait with mould growing on all four corners, making its way in over the years. It was a woman in a huge frilly red dress and a very pretty headdress. She was beautiful. The rest of the room was just filled with small piles of rubble and trash. There was a broken desk with nothing in but a small candlestick with a tiny amount of dry wax that was left in it. We continued into the next room. It looked like the last room but smaller. It has a small amount of foliage growing through the old wooden floorboards, and moss and mould everywhere. Most of the rooms were like this, so we began to think that this wasn't what we had hoped for. Time was ticking on, and we had explored most of the house, finding nothing but moss, mould and rubble, and small leftover items such as candles, a few items of clothing, lipstick and a sewing machine that no longer worked. There were 2 more rooms in the house we needed to look through, on one of which was behind a large wooden door. It seemed to be the only door left standing in this house, and seemed to be in relatively good condition compared to the rest of the property. We left that room until last. We entered the only other room left to explore, and found a small box labelled Jessica's Things. This seemed very intriguing. We opened the box to find nothing but a very small music box. Jack began to turn the lever on the side. The box began playing Bar Bar Black Sheep, which we both recognised pretty quickly. There was something off about this music box. Maybe it's due to its age, but the tune sounded a little off key, and in a way distorted. We wondered why there was nothing in the box but a small music box, but we left it in there and continued to the final room. We stood there nervously looking at the old wooden door, wondering why it looked how it did in the condition it was in. We must have been there for about 2 whole minutes, just looking and arguing about who will open the door and go in first. After I had been chosen to open the door, I pressed my hand against the cold wood. The door was not latched, but it was not far from it. It was open enough for me to just push it open. This room was different to the rest. It looked the same, but there was something very strange about it. It didn't smell the same as the rest of the house. It had a faint smell of woman's perfume. We didn't think much of this. Some reason, because we were creeped out by the room itself. There was a closet at the back of the room, and a few lit candles on the floor. Something wasn't right. We were scared, however. We had found somewhat of a jackpot for urban explorers. There was nothing in this room but the closet and the candles. The rest of the room was the same as the others, with mould and rubble. I slowly crept towards the closet. I was very nervous and jumpy at this point. The floor creaked as I stepped closer to the closet. I didn't feel right. I had come to the closet doors and reached out to grab the handles. I slowly and carefully opened the closet. What we found in there was not what we expected. There in the closet, alone, was a single large frilly red dress, hanging on an old broken coat hanger. The inside of the closet looked clean, as did the dress. This didn't make any sense from this point on, is where things started to go horribly wrong. A few seconds after I opened the closet, me and Jack were startled half to death by the sound of a screaming woman. We were 15, remember, so we wanted out. I slammed one of the closet doors, leaving the other one open, which shut the closet. We ran out of the room, down the old narrow staircase. We reached the living room but could not see the sunlight beaming in through where we entered the property. This spooked and worried us. I shined my flashlight around the room as there was barely any light in it at all. I shined it across the portrait which we found earlier, and what I saw was unimaginable. There was a huge red symbol splashed on the centre of the painting. After a few seconds I realised that the symbol was a pentagram. Now I was more than ready to leave. I just stood and stared at the painting, thinking of the worst case scenarios of the situation. As I was stood there, me and Jack started hearing loud banging from upstairs. Neither of us wanted to check it out, but as there was no apparent exit, we had no choice. We slowly crept up the stairs, all the while hearing the banging getting progressively louder and louder. We discovered that this banging was coming from the closet now. Now we were terrified. I stupidly started opening the door. I don't know why I went in. Maybe it was out of pure shock and not knowing what to do, but I went in only to find the closet violently shaking with both doors closed tight. I crept over to the closet and touched it. The closet stopped shaking. I looked inside only to find the dress was gone. I took a few steps back from the closet and was about to turn around to tell Jack what happened and to find an exit. As I turned around, I had the worst scare ever. Right in front of me was a figure, a female figure, in a long red frilly dress. I screamed and walked backwards, closing my eyes. I was petrified. The room was cold, and I heard the door slam shut. I screamed louder, then stopped. Everything was silent. I didn't want to open my eyes. I didn't know what happened to Jack, but I could not hear anything from him. Surely he could hear my screams and the door slam. My mind, however, was not on my friend at the moment. It was on the ghostly figure that had just come to my face. The room was still silent. I sat there for a few moments, then started to hear weeping. I was spooked out, too scared to open my eyes again. I sat there quietly waiting for the weeping to stop. It didn't. I knew that if I did not open my eyes, it wouldn't stop, so I gained the courage to open one eye, then the next. I could not see anything, but the weeping sounded like it was in the room. I stared towards the door. I then for some reason turned around. I guess it was instinct. When I turned, I saw the figure again. This time, however, I just stopped and stared. I had my bearings this time and I realised that was the woman from the painting. I slowly opened the door without looking and ran out. I found Jack staring at the pentagram on the portrait and motionless. I tapped him and called his name. Nothing. I was in a rush. I pushed him to the ground and he sort of woke up. I pulled him up and we both started to hear very loud sobbing and screaming. We were terrified. We ran to the back of the house where we found an open door much like this one. Much like the one we entered through. We ran and ran until the house was rather distant. We just dropped to the floor and got our breath back. We just sat there looking at the house, recollecting the experiences in our heads, wondering what had happened to us. That night I could not sleep. I went online to research the house. It took me a very long time, but eventually I found it. I won't mention the name of the property, but I can tell you it was built in 1899. I also found something that gave me the chills. There was a family that lived there in the 1920s. The wife and mother of the family that lived there was named Jessica. I was spooked out when I read this. It makes me think about the experience I had in the house earlier that day. Had I seen the ghost of Jessica Watson? Was I crazy? What happened there? I kept researching and found that Jessica was murdered by her husband Matthew. He stabbed her and slit her throat. In the master bedroom. This must have been where the closet was found. No one lived there since.